Welcome everybody. Today is November 2nd, 2020, and this is the session for 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. So today we are going to be going through our question and answer session, and inshallah we'll be covering topics from the categories of faith, dua, religion, and the soul. All right, so we will begin with a Ghanan recitation, after which Dr. Hassam will give us some insight reflecting on the Ghanan, and then we'll proceed to our Q&A. So today we'd like to welcome back Shamsha Andani to recite for us. Shamsha, whenever you're ready, if you would please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ichi para karo bera Guraji para karo bera pira ada mashahaji para karo Iji ai avadata tadina nabidata Nabidata Kiya Dile Guraji Avagura Mera para karo bera Guraji para karo bera.
Thank you, Shamsha. All right, everybody. If you can, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of today's session. Dr. Hassam, if you would, please.
Yali Madad Faiza.
Malali Madad.
Many happy returns. Happy birthday to you. I must say, it was a surprise to me too. You're keeping it hidden.
Dr. Hassam, it was a surprise to me too. I think everybody just decided it was going to be my birthday today, so I might as well take it, right?
Well, on behalf of everyone. And as Maulana said to us, a birthday is a happy occasion, not only for the Imam, but also for the individual in their lives. And if you say it's a birthday for you every day, I say, Shukr, Alhamdulillah. We accept it with love and gratitude.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for Lakshmi. You're also there. Nusri, Yasmin, and all the other co-hosts are there.
And Rosie.
Rosie. And Mola bless you all for your seva and your participation. And I like to share this with all the participants to tell them that you may or may not realize, but there is a considerable amount of planning and management that goes through before these lectures happen this way, including the preparations of the slides and other things. So if you see me repeating this, is because I truly would like all of us to recognize the fact, had it not been for this planning, it would not be possible for me to be able to offer these presentations the way they are. So Mola bless everyone concerned with his plannings and presentation, and you have seen all our hosts and co-hosts in various sessions, and to them all goes our prayers for their dedicated time and effort and intellect in helping me plan the sessions. So I sincerely thank you, and Mola bless you for that.
Thank you, Ami, on behalf of the team.
On behalf of the team. Welcome to today's session, and as Faiza already announced, it's a session on questions and answers. And you know that I have this desire, this impetus every time I hear the Ginan to be able to share with you certain insights, because Ginans, as you know, it's an ocean. It's an ocean of spiritual knowledge. And when I say an ocean, you know what I mean, because we have Ginans that have 5 verses, and we have other forms of Ginan we call Granthas, and there are 1,500 verses and more. Now imagine for a moment, just for 2 minutes, take this time and ask yourself, if you had to recite the Grantha that has 1,500 verses, and you were able to recite 15 verses a day, which is a lot, 15 verses a day, to recite this one Granth alone, it will take 100 days. That is well over 3 months, just for one Granth. And we have so many such Granthas, and as you know, we have an ocean of the Ginans themselves. And what an amazing spiritual heritage that we have, that creates this curiosity that we want to go into this Ginanic text and find out what do they contain. And why is it we need to concern ourselves about what do they contain? Because remember, it is Ginan. And Ginan, you know the meaning? It means this high spiritual wisdom, this higher spiritual wisdom. It is the knowledge of Hakikat and Marifat of Ismaili Satpant Dharam. So if you are asking yourself the question that I want to know what is the Hakikat of Ismaili faith, I want to know what is the Marifat of Ismaili faith, then you will have to go to the Holy Imam for that. And by virtue of the farmans given by the Holy Imam, in this particular case, we are speaking about Ginans. And never ever forget, Ginans have been brought to us as a form of higher spiritual knowledge by the holy peers, who are the highest in creations. And a being who is the highest in creations, you can imagine where that knowledge is coming from. This is the reason why over and over and over again, we need to remind ourselves every single time, every single day, the importance of making sure we are able to follow the holy farmans of the Imam by transmitting these Ginans to our next generations in the best way that we can. Because if we do not do that, we will have failed to follow the farmans of the Imam. And following the farmans of the Imam is our salvation. So you can again reflect upon this idea that when Maula Bapa says this is a tradition, and Maula Bapa uses the word wonderful tradition, must be kept for generations yet to be born, and must be continued from generation to generation. It goes to show how little we know about our Ginans. How very little do we know. This is a lifelong quest, and those who are exposed to the Ginans, what a blessing, what a spiritual blessing. Because remember, when you recite Ginan, when you listen to Ginan, when you participate in Ginan, it is ibadat. It is ibadat. And it is the farman of the Holy Imam that it is through the peer that you should seek to gain knowledge about the reality of who the Imam is. And at the same time, if you wish to learn about Ismaili Satpant Dharam based on Marifat and Hakikat, then that will only come, I repeat, that will only come from the Imam and from the peers. And you know that today, Maula Bapa himself is the Holy Imam, and he is also the Holy Peer. Maula Bapa himself is Ya Ali Ya Muhammad. Maula Bapa himself is Shah Peer. Maula Bapa himself is Peer Shah. So, if you understand these realities, then we can go deeper every time we remind ourselves about our faith. Now, I just want to say a couple of words about my tomorrow's lecture because it concerns what I've just said about the Ginans. And before that, I'd like to acknowledge Shamsha for these beautiful verses that she recited. And by now, I think all of you realize that we have Ginans that are very, very soothing to the soul. And when the soul receives this massage, this soothing, this spiritual soothing, it penetrates our being, it penetrates our mind, it penetrates our whole existence. And in addition to giving us the sawab or the benefit of ibadat, it brings us knowledge, then this higher spiritual wisdom. And I know there are many people who've said to me, can we have more Ginans with meaning and explanation and so on? Yes, we will. Yes, we will, because I think I have sufficiently set the ground for us to move forward from that point on. But we've covered a few Ginans, as you already know, and hopefully those will form the foundation for where we are going to go. Now, about tomorrow's lecture on Tuesday, the lecture tomorrow is to do with the notion of the Shariat, Tariqat, Hakikat, and Marifat, and its very many multiple definitions. And the lecture tomorrow will concern specifically understanding why is it that we, in our tariqah, when it comes to the Hakikat and Marifat, we rely on the teachings of the Holy Imams and the Holy Peers. And of course, when I say the Holy Peers, I am also referring to those great da'is in our tradition, whom the Imam had authorized as being part of the Dawah system and went all across the world where Imam sent them to announce about the Ismaili Satpant Dharam. And these da'is, they did amazing work by propagating Ismaili Satpant Dharam to the communities, the nations, and the countries they went to. And dais like Sayyidina Pir Nasir Khusro and his beautiful rendering, philosophical, theological rendering of the Ismaili faith in philosophical and theological context of the Ismaili interpretation of our faith and the teachings which they have given within the context of the structure of the societies in which they lived. And the language was itself a miracle within the context of our own faith. So those are included in there. And these understanding of these levels of knowledge and participation is fundamental to many, many, many things that we need to know about how we are constituted in the understanding of what our faith says. So in this regard, let me give you just some concluding remark. You know that our constitution, in our constitution, our beloved Imam has said that historically and in accordance with the Ismaili tradition, that the Imam of the time is concerned with the spiritual advancement as well as the talim, as well as the improvement of the quality of life of the murids. And then our beloved Imam says, the Imam's talim lights the murid's path to spiritual enlightenment and vision. I would like you to remember this sentence and never, ever, ever, ever forget it, because this is a part of our constitution by the Imam of the time, that the Imam's talim lights the murid's path to spiritual enlightenment and vision. The point I'm trying to make to you is this. When this part of our constitution says the Imam is concerned with the spiritual advancement, this is a message to the murids and of course all others. The message that if you are wanting to advance spiritually in accordance with Ismaili tradition and you seek knowledge and you seek guidance and you seek direction how to advance spiritually, then it is the Holy Imam's talim that will guide us. You know the word talim refers to Maulana Bapa's teachings, and I'm specifically referring to the teachings of our beloved Imams within the context of the practice of Ismaili Tariqah. I want to be very specific because any Tom, Dick, and Harry can write about Ismailism, as many have. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry can speak about the notion of spirituality in the multifarious and multi-layers way that we see today all over the place. But when it comes to Ismaili Satpant Dharam, when it comes to the faithful, when it comes to the Mu'min, when it comes to the Murid of the Imam, and I'm saying to you, when it comes to matters that pertains to the soul, not your body nutrition, not what university degree you need to take to enrich your mind, to earn your living in the physical world, but I'm speaking about the soul, ruh, atma, the food that this atma needs, the enlightenment that comes to the soul and to the atma. That basis is the talim It is the ta'wil, meaning the spiritual secret of what is written in the scriptures, be it the Quran or others, that the Imam gives to the murid. We derive the knowledge of our soul and the talim related to our spirituality and the ta'wil, the spiritual hermeneutics or the batin related to the revelation, directly from the Imam of the time. The danger is if you make a mistake thinking that people assume that authority to tell the murids, you should do this and you should do that and you should understand this and that, thinking that is coming from the Imam. Well, double check it. Double check it. When it comes to matter related to the salvation of our soul and even about our worldly advancement, because look, this is what this paragraph says. It says, historically and in accordance with Ismaili tradition, the Imam of the time is concerned with spiritual advancement as well as improvement of the quality of life of his murids. The Imam's talim light the murid's path to spiritual enlightenment and vision. In temporal matters, meaning in worldly matters, the Imam guides the murids and motivates them to develop their potential. So you can see our din and our dunya and our din, both, which Imam say intertwined together, is guided by the Imam. It is guided by the Imam. It is given meaning by the Imam. And we as murid of the Imam, we have to ask ourselves, whenever you hear, whenever you learn, whenever you read, whenever you discuss, the first question should come to your mind. Is this the guidance of the Imam? Is this the talim, the teachings of the Imam? Is this what the Imam wants us to do? If you fail to ask this question, then you will fail to understand what the Imam has said, and you will fail to walk on the path that our beloved Imam has asked us to do as his murids. And therefore, I am being very specific. In fact, I'm being very brutal with you. I'm being very harsh and very brutal to say that this is the reason why our peer says, he pant, conduct carried out. This path, Ismaili Satpat, the Sirat al-Mustaqim in Ismaili tradition, it is as sharp as the edge of a sword. So watch out how you walk on this sword. Don't get dragged here and there. Don't be confused. Don't get confused. Don't let things confuse you. Because when Imam himself is the holy 49th Imam and the holy 50th peer, please say salawat Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Maulana Bapa has not left anything vague and anything to chance. He is very clear what he says. Very, 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 very clear. There is no ambiguity in what the Holy Imam says. And if we don't understand, read it, reread it, reread it, and ask people who can guide you. Ask people who can take you to a meaning whereby you can understand. And we are so fortunate, so very fortunate today, particularly in this period of COVID. There are many, many dedicated speakers who are enlightening the Jamaat at various levels and who are sharing their experience with the Jamaat at various levels. And these speakers, in all humility, I say, with utmost respect to them. They are fulfilling the work of the Dais. You remember what Mola Bapa said in Atlanta and said to the Jamaat, you should be Dais. Well, these speakers who come to the Jamaat, some of them have Waisin training. I don't know all of them personally, but whatever I come to know from members who listen and the fragments I come to sometimes listen when I have the opportunity, I congratulate them because they are truly doing the work of Dais. And it may be from one end of the spectrum where there are highly intellectual, highly philosophical aspects of the faith that are being discussed and disseminated, to all the way to personal experience and faith-based understanding given by many speakers. And they are doing the work of the Dais. And we pray, may Mola continue to inspire them and share their experience and knowledge, always within the context of the talim and tawil of the Imam's teachings. So we are very fortunate. We have this synergy, we have this support from one another, that viewers of various expression can participate and learn from these various lectures. So congratulations to them, and I very strongly encourage you, listen to the Ginans, whatever Ginans you can find. Listen to the site Ginan Guru. There is another site which is the site of Ilm and Ginan. There are various sites out there that every now and then they propagate various Ginans. And because there are so numerous, we don't know all of them. But at least whatever you come across, make a habit to listen to some Ginans every day, because I consider it fundamental in the spiritual and knowledge quest of what we do. So I'm going to switch back to Faiza as our host today. And as you know, we have a session of Q&A today. So let us begin.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hassam, for that insight. So actually, I'd like to switch up our routine a little bit, if you don't mind today. And I would like to go ahead and request prayers just now at this time before we go on to our questions, just in case anybody may need to leave during the question session. So if that's all right with you, Dr. Hassam, can we please call on you now for some prayers?
Yes, thank you. I sincerely pray, may Mola Bapa bless you with Hakikati Samaj. Mola Bapa bless you with the true understanding of His reality. May Mola Bapa bless you to be on the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim, guided by His Tawil and Talim.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa bless you with the fulfillment of all your wishes.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa bless you with the realization of all your physical, material, and spiritual aspiration.
Amen.
May Mola Bapa's hand be upon you, all of you, and your family members,
Amen.
to guide you, to protect you, to stay on the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. May Mola Bapa be with all of you, every breath, every step. And may every breath and every step you take in the love of Mawla, may it bring you the sawab of ibadat. And may Mawla Bapa's Noor be with you, to guide you, to protect you, to make you happy, to keep you safe, and to bless you with the fulfillment of all your desires materially and spiritually. And may Mawla Bapa be happy with your love, your dedication, and your submission in the faith. And most of all, may Mawla Bapa always hold our hand that we may follow his holy farman which is our salvation. And may Mola
Ameen.
Bapa bless everyone with Zahiri Batini Didar. Amin.
Amin. Amin. Thank you, Dr. Hassam. I would like to also offer a prayer. I would like to ask that Mola accept Dr. Hassam's seva,
Amin.
and that he provide you with and your family with fulfillment of many more opportunities in the future.
Amin. Amin.
May our Mola continue to abundantly bless all beings in his infinite and eternal nur.
Amin.
May our Mola be undoubtedly apparent to us at every moment of our lives,
Amin.
every decision we make, every breath we take, every thought, every glance, and every heartbeat.
Amin.
May our Mola keep us steadfast in our dasan and sukrit, and may he bless us with inspiration and upliftment in our ibadat.
Amin.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Faiza. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now shall we proceed on to the Q&A?
Yes.
All right, so we have several categories. As I think I mentioned earlier, the categories, I'll just recap, are faith, religion, soul, and dua. So let's go ahead with the first question, Dr. Hassam. Now, these are questions, by the way, that have been submitted in our chat or our emails from our participants. They're all participant questions. So the first one is, it says, to me, faith means trust without proof. To know means having a justified belief, true, evident, certainty. How do I reconcile the two?
Very good question. It's a very, very good question. In fact, I'm tempted to say that we should be using examples both of science and theology to make a lecture out of this. But the question is very specific. So let me say this, that when the question says that faith is that aspect that is without proof, so to speak, and knowing is what you consider is at the level of certainty. So I look at the perspective of the question a bit more differently without changing the nature of the question. This is, perhaps one might say, it's the notion of faith and logic, if you can put it that way. Because logic requires proof. And that's what logic is all about. And, you know, we have inductive logic, deductive logic, we have propositional logic, we have informal logic, we have different categories of logic. And, you know, there is a field in mathematics entirely dedicated to logic. We have a field in philosophy, in the learning of various philosophical strands dedicated to logic. But without going that far, faith in different traditions may be defined differently. But I want to take the definition given in our Ismaili Tariqa. Or if you like, I'd like to refer to the notion of faith from a theological point of view, but also an Islamic point of view. Because remember that the notion of faith, now, if we are on the same page, I'm interpreting faith here to mean belief in God, or belief in religion, to put it very simply. And there are many things in relation to the belief in faith and religion is ambiguous. As a result, people are intellectually or logically lost, and they're being told it is something you need to just believe or accept without the use of your reason or your rationality. So before we go any further, it's important to have a framework in front of us. And what do I mean by that? Well, look, if you are going to study what the material world is made of, and the material world consists of. So I'm talking about the physical world in which we live, the trees and the rocks and all the elements that make up the material world. Where do you go to study it? What field of knowledge would you investigate to study it? Well, if you're looking for the material world, then you will study the most fundamental of those fields, that is physics. You can open a physics textbook and you can begin to learn what the material world constitutes and consists of. And you can go within the same arena. You can look at chemistry, physics and chemistry, that will tell you how the interaction of matter and the material components work together. Now, within the material world, these are all considered, so to speak, inanimate or inorganic aspect. But you look at the material world and you say, wait a minute, I see some forms of life, bacteria and viruses, not to speak of COVID, and you look at the animal world, the animal kingdom, and you look at the various constitutions of where this animal lives and so on, and you look at the human being also, and you said, we are part of this huge diversity of life on this planet. So what field of knowledge will study life? Call it biology. And biology has many different components and many different fields. You know, you have microbiology, you have biochemistry, you have zoology, you have biological anthropology. All of these, you know, we use one word to say it's the field of biology that will give us an understanding of what life is all about. Now remember, biology can't do that by itself. It uses physics and chemistry too. So biology is a little higher in that hierarchy and encompasses this physics and chemistry. That's why you have the field of biophysics, for example. Now you go a little higher up and you said, let's look at the human being, who seems to be the higher than all the forms of life, because a human being can think and speak and can create things like other animals and species cannot. But you say to yourself, besides the fundamental aspect of life, that is procreation, eating, and all the functions that animals do, which the human being also does, is there anything more to the animal, to the human animal? I should say the human being. Yes, there is the notion of thinking. The notion of thinking. There is this aspect within the human being called the mind. Now, animals have mind too, but of a very primitive level. But the human mind is infinitely, infinitely more elevated. So the field of knowledge that will address the mind, it's going to be fields like psychology, sociology, philosophy, and all that aggregate of field, if you like. And these fields will also dip into biology, into mathematics, into physics, into chemistry, to make sense about what the mind is all about, what thinking is all about, what philosophizing is all about, and so on. But then within that scheme, there are those who will say, but wait a minute, you know, we have as part of the human library, these books we call scriptures, the Torah, the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, the Quran, the Zend-Avesta, and all the other scriptures that are there, the Psalms of David and the revelations that came before that. What are those? Say, those are teachings that people called prophets brought to us, just like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was into the cave in Mount Hira, and there was, if you like, a spiritual download on him and say, go and give this message to mankind. Where did he get that message? He didn't go to a school, he didn't go to a university, he didn't go to a library. In fact, people say, Muslims say the Prophet was ummi, he was unlettered. Where did the Prophet get all that revelation, which is now in the book of the Quran? So it came from another dimension of existence. And all prophets receive revelations of the like. That kind of knowledge is studied by a field called theology. So theology studies that. And one more layer, then there are those within humankind, they will say, wait a minute, we understand these hierarchies of knowledge, but if I wanted to experience, know for myself, and this is where the question arises, I believe I can link that to that, the question of knowing with certainty, then you have to experience it. And in order to experience it, it's the next layer after theology. We call it mysticism, or we call it mystical experience. And people like Jalaluddin Rumi and many other mystics, Bayazid Bastami, Rabia al-Adawiya, and many others who are very well-known mystics in Islam, had been part of such experiences and were able to convey the essence of their experience in poetical form, in narrative form, in story form, in abstract language, in concrete language. And if you look at the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi, the teachings of Shams Tabriz, and all other mystics, you find there is some kind of a taste that's different than stuff written by human beings. Now, why did I go to this extent to tell you? Because I'm trying to answer this question to say, every field of knowledge is perfectly valid and acceptable, provided it studies its own dimension and area. Now, the confusion between the notion of certainty at the level of logic and the uncertainty at the level of faith derives from the fact that you are trying to use one field of knowledge to understand another which is higher than itself, and it doesn't give you the answers. And therefore you say it's uncertain. And I explained it in one of my lectures. We call it category error. So it's important to realize in this context that you put into perspective and you ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm trying to study or understand? And if you say, I'm trying to understand what is God, what is the soul, what is spirituality? Well, in today's language, a physics textbook will not give you that understanding. A psychology textbook will not give you that understanding. So you will say, I need to look at a religious text. I need to look at scholars who have written about the notion of theology and have extracted from the scriptures this understanding, perhaps from a philosophical and other dimension, to explain us these dimensions of our existence. Then you might have an access to some access of this knowledge about the soul, the hereafter, life after death, which the physical knowledge does not really address. So they are all compatible in their own rights. but to crossbreed them becomes problematic. Now, that doesn't mean that if you study a certain field, that it won't give you the impetus to think about a higher intelligence. For example, when you look at the sky at night, and if you think, as the Quran and our Ginans and our Imams have asked us to do, that reflect, where did this thing come from? What is the Big Bang? What was before the Big Bang? Although there are questions of physics and astronomy and astrophysics and so on, where did it come from? It's also a theological question. It's also a religious question. So, just to wrap this up, simply to say, two things I want to say, that let's say that today, in the 21st century, you are seeking to perhaps look at all these fields of knowledge that I mentioned holistically, which is not an easy thing to do, but if you have a holistic paradigm that you believe in, and I do personally, and the reason I do that is because in Islam we have the concept of Tawheed, and Tawheed means this unity. It also means this cosmic unity. It also means the unity of knowledge, which means that in all levels of knowledge, we can see the hand of the divine. We can see the hand of the divine. So, without going to all the details, so if you're looking for that unity, in this collective aggregate of the various levels of knowledge, then you will see that today, those who studies this sense of unity in knowledge, you will find space, time, matter, information, and energy. 5 elements: space, time, matter, information, and energy. They constitute the basis, which, if you dig deep enough, will give you a sense of this unity that exists in knowledge. And this was the genius of the Islamic sciences, in which many, many Ismaili philosophers, scientists, metaphysicians, astronomers, and mathematicians participated in our history and made contribution. One example is Nasiruddin Tusi. Look at his work in astronomy. Look at his work in mathematics. Look at his work in theology and philosophy. And you will find that he was a polymath, one individual with many expertise of knowledge that was able to bring together. And the whole idea within Islam is always to begin with the divine, because that's where it begins. And if the divine is there as a beginning, it will be there at the end, which means in all levels of knowing and certainty, there is the hand of the divine. Simply to add, why is it we have this problem in the Western world or in Western philosophy? Because people have removed the hand of the divine and then have remained with whatever that branch of knowledge was. And they say, no, God has nothing to do with the material realm that we are studying. God has nothing to do with the animal world and the diversity of life and the biosphere into this world, and so on and so forth. So when you take the hand of God out, you suddenly have a limitation, a block, and you say, we can't answer some of the fundamental questions. Now, this area is so interesting. Maybe one day we can take up the whole thing. But the thing is, I want to say this to you because, you know, you have to look at it also from a very real, not just philosophical, mental, or speculative point of view. You have to look at it from a real, absolutely real point of view. So think about this way. Think about the origins of life. When did life begin on Earth? Now, there is a whole theory about origins of life that exists. But today, we look at what is known as the prebiotic chemistry of life. And it is infinitely more interesting to look at it from that point of view, because it tells us how much we don't know about how actually life came together. But why? Because the element of the divine is not there in the current study of this. But there are today many scientists who have begun this notion of the holistic understanding about knowing at that level, and also differentiating scientifically. And guess what they say? They say that, well, first of all, you look at life from the standpoint of what is known as the lithosphere. The lithosphere has to do, litho means rocks, meaning the physical structure of the earth. You look at the lithosphere and you said, what's in the lithosphere? Then you look at the kind of next level and you say you are looking at the ocean sphere, the water. Look at the diversity of life that exists in the ocean. Then you go a little further up and you look at the atmosphere, the air that is surrounding our earth. And then you go into the stratosphere. And then you go into the chromosphere, where the sun, the rays and energy of the sun interacts with the whole planet. I don't know whether you have any idea. This is a whole new emerging field of study that is seeking to understand the reality where life came from. And the Holy Quran gives an answer to say life came from water. Just to conclude, every branch of knowledge is valid and real in its own domain until, if you add the hand of the divine, then you can unite them.
Thank you. So you may have touched a little on this, but this takes us to another question from a participant. And the question is, what is the difference between Sufism and Ismailism?
Well, you need to understand each in its own context to begin with. Sufism, generally speaking, is the inner dimension or the spiritual dimension of Islam. So if you look at Islam as a faith, there is the Zahir part of the faith, the Zahiri part of the faith, the external practices, and then there is the inner practices we call the Batin. So Sufism seeks to penetrate the layers of the Batin in its own understanding based on the varieties of teaching that exist from different schools of understanding the inner reality. So there are Sufis that are Shias, there are Sufis that are Sunnis. There is this inner search for the Batin in Shiism and in Sunnism. And generally speaking, it has come from the source we call Sufism. So Sufism, going back all the way to the lifetime of the Holy Prophet Muhammad and Hazrat Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it begins from there. And there are different meanings given to the word Sufism from the word Suf, which means a cloth, a very rough, coarse cloth that people used to wear because to represent the rejection of the material world and the penetration into the spiritual world, things like that. So Sufism is the search for spirituality or the inner meaning within Islam. Now, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam, in one of his articles and explanation, had given the meaning of Sufism and Ismailism. He said, whereby, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, you have Sufism, which is that spiritual aspect, but Ismailism, let me rephrase that. He said, Sufism is very close to Ismailism. I underline the word close. It's not the same. It is not the same. Sufism is very close to Ismailism, but Ismailism has gone much further. Ismailism has gone much further. So if you remain with this thinking, then you will know Ismaili tariqa is a batin tariqa, is a batini tariqa. It is an esoteric faith. So that means the esotericism of Sufism is very close to Ismailism, but Ismailism has gone much further.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, can a child born in a mixed marriage follow two religions?
This is a pointed question in a sense that reality would say, logic would say, no. The reason being, this child exposed to two religions, just to use a philosophical concept, is almost to say you are studying two different philosophies, so to speak, two different paths, two different understanding, and where is that going to lead the child? Now, let's take a controversial example. In Christianity, for example, the cross is considered the symbol of salvation for Christians. They believe that Isa Nabi, Holy Prophet Jesus sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Islam, is the one that was crucified on the cross. Christians consider Isa Nabi or Prophet Jesus, we say Prophet Jesus, but Christian says he's the Son of God. In Islam we say he's a prophet. He is not the Son of God. And he could not have been the Son of God, because we have this surah in the Quran, Surah Al-Ikhlas, that answers to that question. And in Islam we say Holy Prophet Jesus sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is one of the 124,000 prophets who came, and he came before Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. Now, if parent says, let's teach a child Islam and Christianity, to put it broadly, and the child on the one hand is growing saying, well, you say he's a son of God, you say he's a prophet, who do I believe? Where do I go? Where do I draw my understanding? Are you not going to confuse the child? In fact, I think the child will reject both of you, both the teachings. The child says, I don't want this thing. This is confusing. I mean, I'm neither here nor there. The point is that the notion of following a faith is exactly that. Because each faith, each tradition have their foundations, each faith, each tradition has their own layers of understanding. In the end of the day, each faith and each tradition give their own formulas related to what the teachings are that is validated internally from an internal point of view within that faith. And that is how Islam views it, at least from the perspective of Islam, to say that each one of these faiths have their own understanding, and we leave it at that. It's not intended to create contradiction. It's not intended to create disunity. It's not intended to create any disparity, because in Islam we believe all prophets have come from Allah Almighty, meaning from that one God. So do Christianity, so do Jews. So the answer is, it's not a good idea and not even advisable.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to the next question, which kind of flows from your last one. It says, when a person is blessed to be born into Ismaili faith, decides to become a Christian or Hindu or atheist in their adult years, what happens to their souls?
Well, I would say to you this. First and foremost, you look at the larger framework. And I'm giving you an answer from the perspective of how in Islam we look at some of the verses in the Quran and what it says. You know, I quote this verse many times. What does the Quran says? The Holy Quran says that Kul al-Ruh min amra Rabbi. Say, the soul is by the command of your Lord. Now, think about this. I would like you to think very logically. If the soul or the Atma or the Ruh is by the command of God, meaning God commanded that soul to be born into this earth in a particular place, in a particular environment, in a particular context, in a particular dimension and parameters. It's totally logical to assume that. It's not even an assumption, it's a reality. Because it's not that the soul, meaning the real person in a spiritual dimension, made this decision to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go into that society and been born as such. No, it doesn't work that way. The soul is by the command of God. So divine providence has that particular soul is born into a particular environment and into a particular faith for divine reason known to the divine and perhaps to the person born into that faith. So if you are born, let's say, into a particular faith, and if you have that conviction, that understanding that, you know what, God put me here. I'm born into this faith. And you are into that faith. Now you decide to jump ship and go into another faith. You have to have a logical reason to do that. Look, even within religions, there is a history. Judaism came, I'm just talking about recent history. If you look at the Semitic monotheism group of religion, there was Judaism, then there was Christianity, and then came Islam. So now, if you understand this part of revelation, okay, this is important. This is really important. That what was the reason why the same God who revealed Judaism, and I'm talking about the Torah of Moses, and then down the road revealed the Injil, the Gospels of Christ, and down the road revealed the Quran. So if you are already a Muslim, let's say, so you believe in the Quran as the final revelation of God on this earth, why would you want to take a step to take you to an earlier revelation, knowing full well that came 600 years before Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What is the logic behind that? Because if you are prepared to look at the evolution, then you are leaving Islam to go to another level, to a level of revelation that came before. And according to Holy Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, whatever was the earlier revelation, they are all encompassed already within Islam. Islam did not come to deny or to invalidate earlier revelation. It came to renew them and confirm them. If you have this understanding and you are born into Ismaili Satpandaram, then this will make sense to you to say. And remember what I've said in some of my early lectures, that the whole purpose of this revelation and prophets to come was for mankind to be aware that the Nur and the divine guidance continues to mankind through the Imamat. Now, if you are born in Ismaili Satpant Dharam, and now you say to yourself, well, I'm going to leave my Dharam in which I'm born, because remember, the soul is by the command of God. Now what are you doing? You are saying to God, what are you saying to God? You made a mistake. I should not have been born here. Let me go back to some other Dharam that I find there. Is that what your logic is? Is that what your logic is? That you are saying to the Creator who is in charge of your soul, who put you there for a very good reason, you are saying to your Creator, you made a mistake. I should not be into this dharam or that dharam. I will choose my own dharam and go wherever I need to go. Is that what you are saying? Because if that's not what you're saying, it doesn't make any sense to simply say, well, you know what? Let me disregard where I'm born and go somewhere else. So I leave you to think about it. And I leave you to understand in your own logic, because the question was, what happens to that soul? Well, you decide. You decide, because you are making a decision on the basis of believing that where you are, it's a mistake. And if you believe it's a mistake, then who made that mistake?
Thank you. And what about children that are adopted into a different religious family?
Adoption is a marvelous thing, a beautiful thing, and enormous blessing is associated with it. And that also, if I can give you perhaps an anchor, it says in the Quran, it says in the Hadith, it says in our Tariqah, the notion of sustenance, first of all. I'm beginning with the physical. Sustenance is the prerogative of God. No life on this planet or elsewhere, for example, can be sustained unless there is the hand of God, the hand of the divine in it. Why? It is the hand of the divine that is responsible to provide roji or sustenance. This is a foundation. Now think about this way. Here is a child and here is a family. And this child is being adopted by this family. It means by logical extension at this level that this family will be given the roji. Well, let me rephrase that. It is from this family that this child will receive its roji. Now remember what the Quran says. Every soul brings its roji. It's not one gives it to the other. So then this child comes into this family and through this link gets its roji that it brings. So that's stage one. The fact that roji is associated there does not necessarily mean that the soul will actually stay there. Meaning, the child comes to this family in relation to whatever faith this family practices, but later on, intellectually, when this soul matures, what happens? It may say, let me explore if there is some other faiths. Now, when I'm saying that, understand what is going on in the world today in this context. They say Islam is the fastest growing religion. Many countries like France, the UK, the United States, and other European countries, even in Africa, people are joining Islam in multitudes. So there is also that gate of the divine that stays open, because that is God's final revelation, and that is God's final religion. Obviously, therefore, it is to be understood when people are attracted towards that, there is a divine hand in doing that. So there are many messages in the Quran that we need to look at and understand that. And if I'm not mistaken, Professor Andani Khalil has had many discussions in this regard with different organizations and people in this crossbreed religion, Christianity, Islam, and others, to understand. So you may wish to visit maybe some of his presentations to see how he codifies, characterizes, and frames that, so that you have a better scriptural understanding of what this is coming from.
Thank you. And we actually have a follow-up. Speaking of God's hand, what of children born by God's command into mixed faith union?
Yes, that also happens. And it is up to the parents, at least at a young age, to guide their child in terms of that religious practice. Now, if there is a mixed faith union, and if, let's say, each partner practices their own faith, then it is a matter of making a decision for the child that is at that age, which one of the faith the child will practice, if at all. I know sometimes I've seen family, they say, well, we are going to wait until the child is mature enough to decide which faith they want to practice. And that may be a choice, but I don't think that's an informed choice.
Okay. What if somebody converts into our dharma and leaves? Where does the soul lead to?
Because of the nature of what spirituality is all about. As I've mentioned, you have, if you look at just the Semitic monotheism, you have Judaism, you have Christianity, and then you have Islam. So if someone enters our dharma, and based on the theological understanding of Ismaili Satpant dharma, that person, when that person adopts the practice of Ismaili faith and accepts the tenets and the principles of Ismaili faith, then that individual becomes a spiritual child of the Imam, by virtue of the fact that that individual will do bayat of the Imam. And when the bayat is done, he's a spiritual child of the Imam. And then there is this interrelationship of the bayat. And therefore, based on the understanding of the Ismaili faith, and I'm being very specific, that individual is now into the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim and will follow the talim and tawil and the farmans of the Imam for its material and spiritual salvation.
It says here, it's a little bit of a delicate question. Somebody's mother committed suicide. So what happens to her soul?
It's very delicate because there are very many things about suicide that floats around. The first thing I should say, first of all, to this person, may Mawla rest her soul in eternal peace, and Mawla gives the family peace and strength and support and understanding to bear such instances in life. And may Mawla protect the departed soul and protect the family in every way.
Ameen.
In Islam, suicide is not considered or encouraged. It's not a good path. The reason being that in Islam, there is reliance, total reliance on the Creator. That's why if you look at the dua that we recite in the Ismaili Satpandaram, you know, the notion of help, reliance, support comes from Maula Bapa himself, who is the Noor. So that's the link, that's the connection. Now, that does not mean to say we ignore cases of suicide. There are many different reasons why suicide may happen. The only thing we should say, despite the fact that the faith itself does address this matter in a very harsh and very pointed way. But remember one thing, we believe Maula Bapa is Al-Rahman Al-Rahim. He is Al-Rahman Al-Rahim. He is the most compassionate, and Maula Bapa is the all-merciful. Now, we don't always understand the reason when someone commits suicide, but in our faith, when someone does that, we rely on Maula Bapa's mercy and compassion, that Maula will guide that soul, and Maula's mercy and compassion will encompass the soul like a mother encompasses her child, and the families will take knowledge and refuge in understanding that Maula's grace and mercy is there for that soul as it is there for that family. So to answer the question, you say, well, what happens to that soul? We leave that decision into Maula's hand. We let Maula decide what he wants to do. Our task as a family and as a Jamaat is to pray for that soul. And let me tell you with 100% certainty, when the Jamaat prays, the family prays, Maula Bapa listens to those prayers. And when there is the prayer of the family and prayer of the Jamaat, and Maula Bapa listens and responds to these prayers, and let me give you the proof that Maula Bapa responds. Have you seen Maula Bapa in our tariqah when he comes to give us a mulakat, a didar? And what does he say? That I give blessings for the eternal peace and rest for those who are no longer into this physical world. Yes? You remember what he said elsewhere? The souls are where they're in the spiritual world. We are into the physical world. But Maula Bapa say, I give those souls my special blessing for the peace and permanent rest, he says, permanent rest. You see, this is mercy of Hazrat Imam, because it is Maula Bapa speaking. This is the mercy, grace, compassion, love of Maula Bapa for us. And through this love, through this compassion, through this mercy, we rely and we submit to Maula. Because it is that love, that mercy, that compassion, that grace of Maula Bapa that allows us to be where we are. And when it comes to our soul, that is Maula Bapa's spiritual child. So you let Maula Bapa decide as mother and father about that child. And when Maula Bapa say, I give my blessings for eternal rest, for eternal peace, as a family, you should be confident, happy, and know that Maula Bapa himself has made his decision. But we must continually and continuously pray for the departed soul.
Thank you. So there's another question that says, what if a terminally ill patient asks the doctor to end life?
That is a big debate today, a very big debate, especially with the notion of what they say, physically assisted suicide, or guided, the process guided by countries where there are laws doing that. Canada is one of them. But I think what is lacking into this aspect is the notion of where does a person's faith interact. And I know from experience, there have been Muslim physicians, and even within our own tariqah, healthcare givers who have favored this idea of medically assisted suicide. And I must tell you emphatically, that is not a view that Islam shares about the soul. Because every instant the soul is in this world, it has something to gain, even though they may be terminally ill. And so a lot of reflection must be made spiritually to see what are the benefits of that. And the fact that there is, maybe let me take one step back. The fact that a person says, I want medically assisted suicide because I'm terminally ill, and the assumption by the doctors or those people who do that, the assumption by the individual to think that my problems will disappear once I have this medically assisted suicide means life will be terminated into this world. You are sadly mistaken. This is a gross mistake. You know how? What does medically assisted suicide does? It just kills the body. The body just dies. What about the soul? In our tariqah and in Islam, we believe in the soul. Which murid and which Muslim will deny that? Or for that matter, even which Christian, and all religions believe in the notion of the soul. What about the soul? The real you was not the body, was the soul. So there is a relationship between that element that gives life into this body, and when you basically snatch, I'm using that word very carefully, you are snatching life from that soul, there are consequences. Just because you say, give an injection, terminate the physical body, because the physical body is only a vehicle. It's a vehicle that contains the soul. So you say, kill the vehicle, get rid of the vehicle, so you can snatch out the soul out of this vehicle. But it is not you, the individual, or you, the healthcare practitioner, or you, the ethicist, or whoever you are, gave life to this person. Every life, according to Islam, is determined. There is an entry point and there is an exit point. And life has to be understood in this context. Even for the terminally ill, there is a reason why that illness, that disease, that discomfort exists. And we have been asked in our faith to bear that, to bear it as a basis that purges the soul of its blemishes and its mistakes and its sins and so on. It's a spiritual matter. It's a spiritual matter, not just a physical matter. And when we talk about spiritual matter, that is exactly what it is. It impacts the spirit. It impacts the soul. So the person asking for medically assisted suicide should ask, how is this going to impact my soul? Yes, I'm suffering physically. May God forbid. I'm suffering mentally. May God forbid. But there are consequences by taking the law into your own hands. And if you take the law in your own hands by adopting medically assisted suicide, there are very severe consequences to the soul. So better to go through that phase of your physical life, knowing full well you do not die. The body will die, but you will continue to exist into another dimension of life, which, if you are blessed, will be peaceful and eternal. So it's a very tricky question, very sensitive, very personal. I fully recognize it, but I strongly believe we should not forget the dimension of faith, the dimension that what our faith is guiding us about the soul, in order to simply assume a value out there to say life can be terminated if you feel sick and ill and discomfort about it, especially terminated in a suicidal manner. It's a very, very, very delicate matter spiritually, and Islam does not, I repeat, does not recommend that form of eliminating life.
Thank you. Now, there's another question that I believe you have answered in the past, and I'm going to go ahead and pose it to you. But just as a reminder to our participants that there are a lot of questions that have been answered in Dr. Hassam's previous recordings. And so that's another reference for you. But the question is, what does Islam say about organ donation and donating for medical research instead of a traditional burial?
There are multiple views within Islam, but in our tariqah, I have witnessed, actually personally, physically witnessed individuals who have been terminally ill because they had suffered from a form of disease, for example, that required kidney transplant. Now think about it very logically. These individuals were guided in our tariqah in order to preserve life and continue life in the physical world, to receive a kidney, and so their life could continue moving forward. Now, if we are able to receive a kidney, that means somebody donated a kidney. That is organ donation. So it would be perfectly logical to assume that if a person died and their organs were still very good, could they donate them? Yes, perfectly good. And I also remember there is a fatwa, meaning a kind of a religious theological decision that was made at Al-Azhar University by the Grand Mufti of that space, that in some kind of conference many years ago, to say that organ donation is perfectly okay. And that was, made by the Grand Sheikh in Al-Azhar with different Muslim authorities there. Now, of course, I recognize the fact there are many others interpretation within Islam that says the opposite. But I'm saying to you, I am not personally concerned with that view, because our view is the body is only the shell for the soul. And if a person has organs that can be donated, I have not seen anywhere in our faith where the individual cannot. In fact, I've seen the opposite. I've seen the opposite, that an individual can donate their organs for the well-being and to preserve life of someone else. After all, these organs will rot in the grave. What point is that? Do something good and preserve somebody else's life, and that will bring you enormous amount of barakat and blessings. So if you can receive an organ, you can donate an organ. So organ donation is perfectly logical.
Thank you. We're just going to backtrack a little bit to religion and relationships. And there's a question that says, what happens when one is forced to change his religion for the sake of love?
That's a difficult one, because when it comes to love, then the choice I guess you are making is the love of your creator versus the love of your partner. It's still both love. And it depends, I should say, on the notion of religious conviction. How convinced are you about the love of your creator? Because after all, religion is love. In its essence, it is the love of your creator. So if you give up the love of your creator for the love of a human being, I think that runs contrary to the grain. But a mature individual, intellectually and socially speaking, who loves his creator, will be able to encompass the love of his loved one materially also, without compromising his faith. Because in Islam we believe, if you lose your faith, we have lost everything. So, was that worth it? Knowing full well, if there is love of your creator, there is a divine guarantee where that love will do. But the love of one human being for another, which is so amazingly a reflection of the love of your creator, is also as valuable, but there is no guarantee. Because that love can and could break down. God forbid, but it can. But the love of your creator, you may break that link, but the creator never does it. Because you can't go outside of his grace and mercy. So it's a matter of spiritually and intellectually understanding how you make this connection. And essentially you have to say, let me put it to you another way. If there is a love with a partner, and let's say someone says, I'm prepared to die for this love, right? And then let's say you die. Then what was the point? You're now dead. That love isn't there anymore. Regardless what people say, you're no longer there physically to love this person. You are now into another dimension of existence whereby you think your love and everything is there, but it's not here physically. So was it worth it to die? It's a difficult question to answer. So you have to basically say to yourself, what are the limits? What are the limits? But we must not undermine this love, provided it is a love that is within that harmony. But this is like selling your soul for the world. So you decide.
Okay, and I think somebody's looking for some clarification on some joining the Ismaili faith as a new convertee, but later in life stops practicing and exits from our Ismaili Satpan Dharam out of his or her own choice. What would happen to their soul?
Only Mawla knows the answer to that question, because when a person enters the faith, they do bayat of Hazar Imam. They do bayat, they give an oath of allegiance. It's in our dua. And when a person enters our dharam, when the person enters the Ismaili interpretation of Islam, they give an oath of allegiance. And if they were not serious, and then they break that oath, then in our dua, it's clearly said. I happen to have the dua book here. So if you look at what it says, which is actually very clear. So this is, of course, Surah 48, Ayat 10 of the Quran, which is in the Quran. It says, O Prophet, verily those who give thee their allegiance, they give it to Allah Himself. They give it but to Allah Himself. Allah's hand is upon their hands. Then he who breaks it, he certainly breaks it against himself. And he who fulfills what he has pledged with Allah, he shall in return reward him in plenty. There, it's very clear. If you enter the faith, you gave an oath, you broke that oath, then this ayat of the Quran gives the answer directly. So reflect on it. Think about it. What happens?
Thank you. All right. Now I have another question that's related to dua. And the question is regarding the relationship between Nadi Ali and the end of the third part of dua. La fata ila Ali, la sayfa la zulfikar.
So
is there one?
The notion is this. In the third part of the dua, I don't know why I have my dua book here today, but in the third part of the dua, there is no mention, well, in the Nadi Ali, there is no mention of the Zulfikar. So because the third part of the dua here says, La fatta ila Ali la sayfi la Zulfikar, tawassalu bindal masaibi mawla kumir hazil mawjud Shah Karimi Hussaini. Now, I can understand the indirect connection being made because in the Nadi Ali, as you know, it is a universal prayer amongst all Shias in whatever corner in the world they are, which basically says, cry aloud to Ali, who is the epiphanic source of wonders. You surely shall find him helping you in troubles. All grief and anxiety will disappear by your power and authority, O Ali, O Ali, O Ali. And in the dua we are saying, there is no hero except Ali. There is no sword except his sword, Zulfikar. Seek at the time of difficulties the help of your Lord, the present living Imam, Shah Karim al-Hussaini. So there is a resemblance to this tasbih in a sense about the part that we say, Tawassalu Windal, that seek at the time of difficulty the help of the living Imam. Because Mawla Bapa is Ali himself, and therefore the Nadi Ali applies that way. But as you see, there is no mention of Zulfikar in the Nadi Ali. It is there in the dua. And the concept of the sword in Islam takes different interpretation as you look at the context. And one of the interpretation that it is the sword of justice. That was the sword. Zulfikar was that majestic sword that Mawla Murtaza Ali alayhi salam had and believed in our tariqah to be a sword that descended from heaven. That sword was not forged by human hand in the material world. It descended from heaven. And that sword that has many mysteries behind it, which is too long to speak in this lecture today. But it is the sword of justice, but that sword of justice implies and indicates it is the sword of the intellect. It is a symbol of the intellect. It is a symbol of equilibrium and justice and balance. So how you connect those two things, if you look at it historically, and you look at it conceptually or symbolically, you can make the connection symbolically if you like. But Maula Ali, symbolically speaking, is the totality of all of this and can be symbolized by Zulfikar or that sword. That's why there is no hero except Ali, and there is no sword except his sword Zulfikar. And Nadi Ali speaks, as a matter of fact, of that practical application. And you can see in history an aspect of this practical application when the Holy Prophet was stuck in the Battle of Khyber, when the conquest of that fort had to be done, and how Angel Gabriel came and told the Holy Prophet that you will not be able to conquer this fort without the help of Maula Ali. And the angel Gabriel brought the tasbih of Nade Ali to the Holy Prophet and said, recite this tasbih. And Maula Ali manifested himself where the Prophet was, and the Battle of Khyber was won by the Muslims by the intervention of Maula Ali, and the sword Zulfikar, in that battle in particular, as amongst other places, played a significant symbolic and actual role, whereby those who opposed the hakikat and the truth of Islam they saw the justice through that sword.
Thank you. Now, somebody has written a little bit of a lengthy question regarding some confusion that he's having. So I'm going to go ahead and read that to you. Question says, I am confused. Sociology, psychology, physics, biology shows a truth that faith, the level of trust, differs between individuals based on their physical and social environment, as well as genetics. Why are we all asked to be the same by ALWAAZ, Mukikamriya, and imams, similar to the way presidents and prime ministers speak? Although I reflect through science, theology, and mysticism, I am most confused by ALWAAZ and imams.
Well, I don't know where the confusion is, because I've been extremely clear to say, if you want to find your salvation in physics, go ahead and find it, it's there. But let me ask the question to this individual, that you say you find certainty and all of that into those fields. So tell me one thing. If you look at, in physics, the domain of quantum mechanics, which is the latest, the most successful theory in the physical sciences is the theory of quantum mechanics. There are at least a dozen interpretations of what quantum mechanics is, philosophically speaking, when you interpret the science of quantum mechanics. Is it the Copenhagen interpretation, the multiverse theory, is it this theory or that theory? We can go into all the names and look at the differences. So my question would be, where's your certainty there? Where is the certainty? No scientist has any certainty at that level whatsoever. So that is a very personal word and a very personal way for this individual to interpret it. Likewise, when you talk about sociology and philosophy, well, it depends whose sociology and philosophy you're reading. So if you're reading the philosophy of someone like A.J. Ayer, the great British materialist philosopher, the secular materialist, and you find your salvation and your certainty in material things, well, so be it. But that doesn't mean you have been asked to be the same. You are an individual. You have your own way of thinking. You have your own way of investigating. You have your own way of reading and understanding. And no one No one, certainly not in our faith, is taking that away from you. You are entitled to exercise the level, depth, and the way of investigation that you are choosing for yourself. It's perfectly acceptable. Neither the Imam, nor Mukhi Kamariyas, nor the leaders or prime ministers ever, or certainly not in our faith, has compelled any individual to be forced to look at any of these domains in their way. This is a mechanism of explanation. If you want to participate and search more within that context, it's there. If you feel you have a different perspective, it is also there. If you feel you have no perspective, it is there. If you feel you don't want to accept that perspective, it's entirely your choice, because it says in the Quran, "Wala ikra fi din." There is no compulsion in religion. So you are free. You can take whatever domain of knowledge you want. And if you believe that domain is giving you your salvation, you are very welcome. So there is no confusion. It's simply how you accept it, how you understand it, how you interpret it, and whether you accept it or not, it's entirely your choice. So you can continue searching, seeking, investigating. That is what you are expected to do. And that is what our faith insists. So, just a word of caution. If you want to learn about philosophy, for example, and you want to learn the various trends of philosophy and philosophical thoughts, well, let me tell you this. Chemistry isn't going to cut it, because, quote unquote, there is no philosophical chemistry, so to speak. Chemistry is, whether you want organic chemistry, you want physical chemistry, you want nuclear chemistry, quantum chemistry, you want prebiotic chemistry, biological chemistry. Well, go ahead and investigate the various realms of chemistry and decide which one you think you're attracted to. But none of those is going to speak about, what is the meaning of life or why life exists. It may tell you where life may have come from in terms of its chemical constitution. Even that hasn't been resolved. So if you look at, for example, the origins of life from the study of biochemistry and chemistry itself, the answer is nada, zero. No one knows. Even the Miller-Urey experiment that was done in 1952 about the origins of life, it's kind of been debunked, thinking that life is this chemical soup of proteins and DNAs and RNAs and so on. Of course it's not. We know that today. So I'm saying that if you're looking for that certainty in any field of knowledge, every field of knowledge, every single field will tell you there is no absolute certainty in any of those fields of knowledge. That's why the field of knowledge expands, grows, integrates, expands, grows, integrates. They find more, they integrate more, and then the whole equation of science changes as we discover things. And that's why, in contrast, it is said, the only one absolute certain thing is the divine element in you, if you can find it, if you can rise to that level. And that divine element, which is your spirit, your soul, whether you choose to look and find it from physics or biology or chemistry or whatever dimension you want, but if you find it, then that's where you will find the ultimate, absolute, incontrovertible, non-debatable, total certainty. Because that element in you is the divine element.
Thank you, Dr. Hassam. All right, now we've gone over time. We have patiently had 3 people with their hands up waiting. So perhaps we can quickly go through some of those questions and then we'll end up, then we'll call it a day. All right, so Shiraz, can you unmute?
Yali Madat.
Malali Madat.
Yeah. First of all, it was a blessing for Khalil to join us. And then we have Dr. Hasham. And today we had also Faiza's birthday. So
I think you made that up, Shiraz.
no, my question is today's Ginan that was very well sung. But I am just confused for curiosity. Who wrote that? Which peer wrote that Ginan, sir? The Ginan that was sung today. Because I don't see Kapir Bolia or something like that in that Ginan.
So there is the name of Pir Adam Shah in the beginning. Yes, and you're quite correct. She didn't recite the refrain where the which Pir composed this Ginan. I think this Ginan was composed by a Sayyid.
He was a Pir, was he, or
no? One of the children.
One of the Sayyids. Okay.
Yeah, one of the Sayyids, and I need to investigate and get back to you, because we have a couple of the Ginans like this by Sayyids that have a question mark on them. The Ginan we recited, there's no doubt on the Ginan itself, but the composition of this one here, I think, is by one of the Sayyids. So I will look into it and get back to you.
Yeah, because my question wasn't why she didn't sing Pir's name in the Ginan or whatever. It's just that, I looked through the whole Ginan and I couldn't find any Pir's name.
No, you won't. That's what I'm saying. There are a couple of Ginans where we have some question mark. But, because we recite it in Jamaat Khana, I'm quite okay with it. We do not, build those restrictions. I think Lakshmi is putting her hands up and she has a feedback on that.
Yes, it's the last verse of the Ginan is Pira Masta Hussaini, Tuhi Apar Guruji, Antana Tera, Par Karo Beda. So it says Sayyid Hussain.
But was there a peak? I don't know.
Asnar is Sayyid Hussain from the Ginan book.
It was a Sayyid, not a Pir. He was one of the children of the Pirs. I need to find out which one. That's what I say. I will look into it and get back to you. But it was not by what we say Putuna Pir.
Yeah, exactly. That was my question. Yeah. And the second question I have, we hear lots of times, every time in Jamaat Khana, Ananta Kharo, Salako Moto, everything. But I've never heard anybody singing that Ginan by Pir Sajjad in Garbawali. Is there any reason why it's not being sung? Or there's a Ginan by Pir Sajjad which is Garbawali. And nobody ever has sang that Ginan. I mean, I haven't heard that Ginan.
Well, there is Girbavli Nani and Girbavli Moti by Pir Sadruddin. And the Ginan is not a very popular one, but a very, very linguistically concentrated and packed language in this Ginan. And a thorough understanding of multiple languages is required to decode this Ginan. I have looked at this Ginan, and it is a wonderful, very revealing Ginan, and many beautiful things are expressed into this Ginan, from material to the spiritual, in many different things that we materially don't look at it this way, but the Ginan does expressively gives definitions and meanings. So no, I haven't heard the recitation of the Ginani. That is your question. But like I say, it's not a popular Ginan. It is actually a Grant. And there is Girbavli Nani, Girbavli Moti. And it requires a considerable intense research to bring this thing out at a popular level. There are times I've mentioned this Ginan and parts of this Ginan in terms of the information it contains, and very, very revealing. And I shall do so again in some of my, inshallah, Mawla willing, in some of my future lectures, because I am looking at this Ginan along with similar Ginans that are not popularly known, but at least if we can bring the gist and the meaning and the dig a bit deeper into the inner surface, it's exceedingly well express many scientific principles, many clear understanding as to what underlies the physical realm of existence is given into this Girbavli.
I made some investigation into it, and it was said that Girbavali actually means a womb of a mother, where bayats are being taken, before the child is born there, and that's why they call this Ginan Girbavali.
Yes, yes, and that is only a small part of it. But in this Girbavli, there are questions, like for example, and this is true, this is actually in the Ginan. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? And why? What are the 25 elements from the beginning of creation? What is, for example, Purushan Prakrit? What are the various layers of the spiritual physiology of the human being? And what role do they play? And it goes on and on and on and on. You would be like, if you don't know what you're looking at, even if you're just reading it literally, it's going to give you a headache. But if you know what you are reading, you would be wonderstruck. Now, even those terminology given in the Quran, Alme Nasut, Alme Malakut, Alme Jabarut, Alme Lahut, all these terminologies are mentioned in Girbavli, including other levels that are not mentioned in the Quran by these names. So I'm saying to you, it's such a packed Ginan in terms of its language that every sentence that gives a statement needs to be unpacked and decoded, and then you find the real juice is flowing out of it. So it's a tedious task, and I have to tell you that one of the great authorities in the Ginans during the time of Imam Sultan alayhi salam, Karadora missionary, he actually wrote a commentary on Girbavli. And some of the pieces, I don't like to say this thing because it's irrelevant to my presentations. Some of the meaning that he has given is out of this world. Given who he was and how he managed to dig and penetrate the inner layers of this understanding is really something marvelous. But thanks for asking the question. It is one that is at this moment beyond the scope of my lectures, and so to speak, but it's work in progress.
So just one last one. My wife was sitting with me and she was curious to know what happened to the sword Zulfikar. I mean, is it still in existence in a museum somewhere or?
No. You have to understand, things that descend from that plane of existence go back there.
Okay.
And then they come back again when the time comes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faiza. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. We'll move on to the next question now. So Zuli, I know you've been waiting for a long time. Can you unmute your mic, please?
Okay, thank you, Yali Madad. And a happy birthday to you.
I have to clarify, it is not really my birthday today. Somehow everybody just thought it's my birthday, so I'm just celebrating today, but thank you.
Okay. Who is the rumor monger?
Not me.
Because you know, the danger of that is, Faiza, we will actually miss your real birthday in the
That's okay. I'll celebrate it today. I'm happy.
Next time, bring a cake. We'll do a virtual cake celebration.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So my question to you, ALWAAZ, is during your presentation during Eid Milad al-Nabi, you mentioned that the gates of heaven were open when our Prophet Muhammad was born. So for symbolic purpose, for my understanding, does it mean that for the followers of the Prophet and his progeny, which is the Imams, the gates are forever open? Or another question is, what happened to the prophets like Prophet Jesus, Prophet Moses, or other prophets who came before, that option was not there? The gates were never opened?
Very good question. Now, in terms of other prophets, first of all, one thing is important to know. There has always been a very specific blessing associated with the presence of that prophet within and amongst human beings and mankind. Okay, so no prophet came haphazardly and departed haphazardly, because remember, this is a divine guidance, it's a divine hand, it's a divine exercise. If you like, the coming of revelation from a prophet is like a divine intervention in the field of human participation or human existence. And when it comes from the divine, there is always a divinely guided message and motif for the human beings, as a result of which there is a permanent imprint in the memory of the history of human existence about that divine intervention that came at that time. So probably too numerous to mention now and here, because we would be required, in a sense, to look at the story of many of these prophets and say, and underline and say, wow, look at this. Now there is one that's perhaps easy to do immediately, and that is about Isa Nabi himself. And Professor Andani has really explained this very well, and in which he had described that, remember, the birth of Jesus Christ, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you look at him as a prophet, the actual message of God, Allah's message, was the very body of Jesus Christ. It was not the book, although he brought the message which was put as an Injil, the gospel, but actually the body of Christ was itself the manifest message. And in certain Christian tradition, they call that the demiurge, and there is a whole metaphysical implication to that notion. But keeping to what we say, so when Allah breathed his spirit into the womb of Mary, so, and remember, Jesus was born out of Virgin Mary, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this virgin birth is the symbolism that the word, it is the word of God made flesh, not the word of God made book like the Quran. So being the word of God made flesh, that in itself is the equivalent of when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam come, when he was born, the gates of the seventh heaven flung open, but when Jesus was born, it was the Word of God made flesh. Are you following me? So that
a little
is
confusing.
That is a kind of equivalent, in a sense, that each prophet brought that peculiarity as divinely ordained. Now, your question as to, does that mean the gate of heaven were not open when other prophets were there? No. These gates of seventh heaven are always in the hands of the Creator. And for people who basically, let's assume for a moment, okay, for the sake of our argument, let's say if you consider the seventh heaven to be the culmination point of salvation, right? Then every prophet who brought a message had the ability to guide people to that gate of salvation, which was the seventh heaven. The only difference is because Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being the greatest, the leader of all the prophets who ever came, the chief of all the prophets, if you like, and also being the final prophet of God on earth, and to bring the final revelation or message of God on earth for all humanity, when he was born, and there are other elements which I mentioned, that for example, the whole purpose of creation, which was make known the Imamat, the Nur of the Imam, the blessing that accompanied that purpose was actually that if you followed the message of the Holy Prophet in its entirety, not in its fragment, then you certainly would be a candidate to go to that seventh heaven. But the gates of those seven heaven flung open. And there is so many places in the Quran mentioned about these heavens. Seven heavens, seven earth, and many things. And so there is this association across the board. And we can leave it at that.
So for us Smileys, it is by the grace of the Imam, the present living Imam, who will guide us through this path. So my question is then, how do you put that into perspective as a Smiley, the quote, gates of heaven?
What was your last part? How do we put into perspective?
Yeah, the quote as the gates of heaven. So what do you refer to that? Is it salvation or what?
Well, look, the context that we use of salvation is asal mevasal. Imam Maula Bapa tells us, other Imams have told us, that after that, there should be no separation between the soul of the murid and the nur of the Imam. And even within that, people have different expression, philosophical and theological, to explain. But essentially, he says the drop goes back to the ocean. Now, that's our context. Even when we look at this part of the Quran, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, he from whom we have come, to whom we will return, is that concept. The drop will go back into the ocean. So that's our context. And the intermediate heavens are also there, because there are 7 of them, but they require deeper explanation. For example, look, if I say to you, what about this material creation, the physical creation? Well, that is considered a heaven, because that is known as ALWAAZ. That is the actual material realm within which we are currently functioning. It is the world of this material expression we call ALWAAZ. Then there are other layers above it that are non-material. But even in those layers, just as the soul exists physically here, the soul also continues once the physical aspect is done. It continues into this other dimension of existence. not every single soul ends up into that asal mein wasal, which, as I said, it's rather tedious and complicated to go into that meaning. But the thing is, you have heard Imam speak about la makan. Imam Sultan Muhammad alayhi salam made a statement many years ago. Look what he said. From the beginning of creation, imagine this, from the beginning of creation till today, the Imam says, very few people have made it to La Makan. Now, we have to understand this is not a gift for all freedom. There are processes and things involved. Although we sometimes read it, sometimes hear it, and so on. But what does that mean? So where do these all other souls end up? So there are dimensions and layers of existence that needs to be understood in a very logical, rational way to see what happens to these souls. And fortunate for us, many indications are given in the Quran, certain indications, many of the indications are given by the Imams in Farmans, and different Imams at different time. And many indications, and actually clear indications, are given in the Ginans in terms of that. So it's a very broad and wide, but your question is understood. And just to conclude that, only Imam has the key to all 7 heavens. In the context of our society in which we live, it is Mawla who determines at which level and which heaven a soul eventually ends up. Thank you for your question.
I had the question about what if a person is on life support, and is it okay to let him go? And I have another question that...
Let me answer this one first.
Okay.
Well, life support is exactly what that is. Now, there is the intervention of the hospital or of the physicians, hopefully, I say hopefully, who guides the families that are there or the individual in life support to basically figure out when that life support has to be terminated. If we understand life support to mean this person will not be able to sustain and support breath once the machines are disconnected. So in many instances, when there is life support, which means keep the breath going, and by virtue of keeping the breath going, there are different things that happens. The life of the heart, the life of the brain is interpreted by means of, if the person continues to breathe or continues to have, if you like, the brain, the electroencephalogram that exactly shows what is activities in the brain and in different parts of the brain. And of course, the beating of the heart, which are 2 essential aspects. So I will not tell you there is a cut and dry answer because we don't know the circumstances, but it is subjective based on the guidance where the hospital gives, the doctor gives to the families. And when the stage arises where they say there is nothing this machine can do anymore, then when the machine is disconnected, the person just naturally departs its physical body. So I'm being vague deliberately because different circumstances dictate different reaction, but that is basically my understanding. What's your next question?
Next question is, we have those 7 knots on the gut part thread. What does it signify? There are 7 knots on the gut part thread.
Yes.
So what does it signify?
these knots are symbolic of different things, but when the gut part dodo is generated, means through the gut part ceremony, that's why we call it gut part no dodo, these knots that are tied, they are knots that are preventing any afat and bala to reach and compensating it with the blessings that this gut part dodo gives. So it is an omen of very good a blessing that comes out of the prayer of the gut part, which is very extensive, as you probably know. And when we wear this dodo, it is the blessing of the Imam through Mukhi Kamariyas that are reflected into those 7 knots, which encompasses, if you like, all aspects of our being, those 7 aspects, those 7 knots that are in the gut part dodo. At some point, when we come back to the topic, I will explain what each knot in detail mean. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Mishnah Zat.
Thank you. So on behalf of all the participants, Dr. Hassam, I would like to thank you for your time and for agreeing to accept and address these questions from our participants. And I would like to thank the participants, our Zoom family. We hope you all enjoyed today's session, and we'll see you next time. Be well and be safe, everyone. Yali Madat.
Mullah Ali Madat. Mullah bless you all. Yali Madat. Take care.
Ameen.